Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology. Welcome in to another live show. If you're watching the replay, then hang out anyway because we're gonna have fun. It should be fun to watch even as a replay. You can actually hit the live chat replay and watch the comments come in real time. You can also just do a regular comment on this video as well. We're just gonna hang out and chat about vintage tech. Had a lot of fun chatting the other day, kind of designed for newbies. Wow, my hair is amazing in a not so good way. And, we might touch on beginner stuff, but I thought tonight we would really kind of focus on the vintage tech side of things. Sorry, what we're talking about. So, yeah, vintage tech is a way to go. Old radios, welcome in. Jeremy Hobbs, welcome in. Yes. And for those of you that aren't getting the notifications, I get a lot of people after these lives. They're like, man, I didn't get any notification. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know why that's happening other than make sure you're, select all and make sure your device notifications are on. Yeah, I mean, that can happen where it gets turned off somehow. Maybe you did a Apple update or a Samsung update, an Android update or whatever. And for whatever reason, that feature got shut off. So that's something to check. I don't know. I apologize. Welcome in, BlockZ Gamer. Welcome in. Love my Fluence. If you like Fluence, you'll be particularly interested in tomorrow's video, where we talk about vintage tech a bit. We talk about a lot of tech. It's an interesting show. It's going to be published. We shot it today. It'll be published tomorrow, 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And it will be geared toward people that are shopping for a record player and help them identify a bad one. How do you identify a bad record player when you're out there looking and shopping? Kyle, welcome in. Rhett Law, welcome in. Gold Boy, welcome in. So happy that you guys are joining. Don't forget to smash the thumbs up on the way in the door. I would really appreciate it. So, vintage tech. Let us talk about vintage tech. I am very different than other YouTubers in that A, I focus on the entry level, unabashedly so. B, I give priority, I would say, to non-vintage tech. I think that'd be a fair assumption. There's been probably more non-vintage turntables reviewed on this channel than vintage ones. But I love vintage tech, and it turns out some of my favorite turntables are vintage. And I love my what am I saying? I love my SLB5. I love my SLBD22. I love a lot of vintage tech. I love the little Philips portable. I love everything going back past vintage into antique with my hand crank 1917 Vita-Nola phonograph. And yeah, let me know what you guys have vintage-wise as well in the comments or in the chat. I love it all. I've just learned to appreciate other aspects. So when I started doing this, there was really no way for me to get into the vintage. So very expensive, you know what I mean? Comparatively, you can get some good deals, and we've talked about how to do that. But when you're very, very first starting and your first record player is $35, then you're not going to be able to step into vintage at that point. So I have kind of grown to the point where I'm able to recognize what to look for, and I've gone out and snagged some items. One of the things that was interesting to me, because as I started this channel, we were reviewing a lot of modern tech, a lot of import tech, was everybody in the comments of every video saying, this is garbage, you need to go vintage, go vintage, go vintage, go vintage. Nothing is good except for vintage. Nothing new is good. Only vintage is good. Instead of wasting your money on this import crap, just go ahead and buy vintage, vintage, vintage. So I thought to myself, okay, it'll be interesting if and when we get to the point where we're able to review vintage tech. And we did. We got to that point fairly early on, or we started trickling in some stuff. And we've reviewed, just off the top of my head, we reviewed BSR type changers. We reviewed dual changers. We've reviewed, we've reviewed Gerards. We've reviewed a host of portables. We've reviewed vintage or antique phonographs of all types. So there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of vintage turntables, and I like them. I do like them, but they're not perfect. To me, they're not necessarily perfect just because they're old. There are risks associated with vintage tech. There's a possibility of blown out capacitors. Now, if you're a person who feels comfortable putting on capacitors, then that's fine. If you look at that and say, there's always a threshold, right? To one person, a unit that's viable as a one to work on and kind of get working again, maybe belts, lubrication, clean it up. And another person might be, yeah, I'll recap it. I'll get a new motor. I'll, put in all this stuff. So it just depends on what your comfort level is at. For me personally, I grew up around electrician-minded people and learned to solder at an early age. And that being said, I still don't really enjoy doing that. So if I find a turntable that needs new caps or it needs extensive work, I'm probably going to pass up on it, keep looking for something that is better. Now, if I came across, let's say I got my heart set on something that I just had to have, then I could see myself potentially saying, well, this one is worth it to me to fix. But it's always funny to me, like that we reviewed in I think it was late November, early December, we reviewed this realistic brand all-in-one unit from the early 80s. And I said, that was junk. I'm like, I don't want to replace this. I don't want to, it needs so much work. Everything needed work. The tape player was broken. The 8-track was broken. The record player was seized up. And yes, if we go on that sliding scale, somebody could fix it and perhaps relatively easy. Of course, what this guy's easy isn't the same as this guy's easy or gal. And so that's something to take into consideration as well. But for me personally, I didn't want to do it. Maybe I should have made that more clear in that video. I don't want to invest in this. I would be much more happy chucking it into a dumpster, which I did not do. Didn't throw it away. It is in the hands of somebody who will care for it and love it much more than I could ever. So that was a ramble for you. Let me jump into some comments and see what's popping in the chat feed today. First of all, welcome everybody and thank you for making time. I really appreciate it. That's awesome. Blasey Gamer says, I have a Quadriflex PCD 338 cassette deck. Okay, I'm going to look this up. Sometimes when people say stuff in here, I don't know what it is. I'll look it up in real time. Let me see what it is. Quadriflex. Love cassette technology, by the way. Ooh, that is cool. Wood paneling on the side. This one has black faceplate. And then, wow, that's interesting. The color-coded keys. I dig it. That's really cool. There's another one. Wow, that looks like pro level. Stereo cassette deck. I like it. That's cool. Absolutely like it. I love my 1911 Victrola. Was that 19? That's really awesome. Yeah, and my old radios, my vintage phonograph makes an appearance in tomorrow morning's video, so check that out. Jeremy says, let's get those thumbs up. Let's get them flying. It really helps. It does, guys. 16 people in here right now. Only 3 thumbs up. If you wouldn't mind, it doesn't cost you anything, but it does help things. Kyle says, my best friend Evan got me a Tupac record for Christmas. That was awesome. Old radio's early Queen Anne model on LP 140. Now you're talking the special ones. Those are really cool. Hawaii says bye. So sorry. I don't know why. Hello, goodbye. Tupac's the GOAT. David says, in my opinion, dual changers are perfect for 78 since you can pull the spindle out and center manually. That's interesting. I never thought about that, but yeah, that's right. I did 2 videos on this dual 1219, I think it was. And so here's what I did. You'll enjoy this, or maybe it'll make you cringe. But I learned probably too late in life in terms of record players not to borrow anybody's record player. It's one of the reasons why I will not do reviews for companies that want to send a loaner. A lot of companies are like, okay, we'd love you to review this new turntable, but we want it back when you're done. And I'm like, no. First of all, you're getting all sorts of visibility on this channel. Our audience is watching it. There's marketing equity in this. It's not, even if it's a negative review, you're getting images, you're getting people talking about it. We're not doing that. Plus, I don't want to be responsible when the thing breaks. So we've turned down a lot of reviews because of that. Although oftentimes they'll just say, you can actually keep the product sample. That's okay. Because, not that we just want to accumulate a bunch of record players, but there has to be some sort of give and take when it comes to, taking the time and effort to do a review and at least a product sample. We don't accept money for reviews. We never have. We've never been sponsored for a review, but you have to provide the record player for us to review, or I will go buy it at my discretion. But if you want a record player reviewed, you're a company and you want a record player reviewed, then send us a product sample. I'm happy to do. I'm not going to pull punches in that regard. And that isn't intended to sound harsh or anything. It's just it takes a lot of time and effort to do a review. It takes a lot of time. It takes a better part of a day to film. It takes a better part of a night to edit. And that's if you get it in the first take and there's nothing wrong, which oftentimes there are things wrong. So, when they want their testing it back, it's like, no. So, and that's okay. We don't need to, we're not desperate and needing every single thing we get our hands on. That being said, even doing a weekly show, which is what we're doing, going forward at this point, it's going to be tricky coming up with 52 record players to review. And we all know that record players are the most popular subject. So there will be other topics, but I promise I'll make them interesting and things that are unique and whatnot. But back to the topic of borrowing. I don't want the liability. And so having not learned that lesson enough, I had borrowed a buddy of mine. Actually, he was a coworker at this place I worked at the time. And he's like, I got a dual 1219. It's got some kind of short with the left channel. You could take it apart, you could look at it, and then you can review it on your show. I said, this is great. So I took it home. Now, I worked quite a ways from where I lived at the time. And so I put it in the back of our vehicle, and it was an SUV. And I put the turntable in the backpack. Made sure it wasn't going to slide around and get smashed up. But first of all, you should never put stuff that you don't want shaken apart behind your rear axle. Because from a geometry standpoint, that's where all of the motion of your trip is being translated to what's beyond the rear axle. You should always put it as close to the front of the vehicle as possible. Whether or not it's a moving vehicle, a pickup truck, or just your car, you want it as far forward as possible. That was the second mistake I made. And by the time I got home, I get back there, and I didn't notice it at first, but in fact, it had shaken apart many parts inside it. And I took the thing apart. It is like a clock, and this had sprung everything. It was a mess. Long story short, it took me a good 3-4 weeks, and his patience was running thin. And I'm like, so it's still not working. I'd see him every day too. So as I update, what's going on? And I'm like, well, at this point, it's still not working. And I was looking at service manuals in excruciating detail. I was rebuilding things. And it was a mess. Did get it working. And it turned out it was a short, probably just a cartridge. It was probably just a cartridge thing. And meanwhile, I had this thing apart. I had this thing torn apart. So you want some entertainment, go look up my old video, my duel with a duel is what it's called. I did a couple videos on that. So yeah, I don't. That was a vintage unit. We did a vintage Marantz linear tracker early on, and we've done a ton of vintage since. I do like vintage, but it's not just instantly good if it's vintage. That's what I'm trying to say. Just because it's vintage doesn't mean that it's good, and just because it's an import from China doesn't mean it's bad. How about that? That's a fair trade-off. There are some fantastic things that are imported from China that are great, like iPhones. You're probably watching this on a Chinese device right now. So, just arbitrarily saying, oh, it's imported from China, then it's junk. That's not fair. So, there we go. Get caught up on comments here. Sir Truffles, welcome in. Glad you made it as well. YouTube hasn't been giving you notifications at all lately. That's what I've heard. Brett Law says Kenwood KD500. Let me look this up. Sounds like a receiver. Is it a receiver? No, it's a turntable. Cool. I love the push buttons on the lower left. That's really cool. I also like how the platter is really tall with kind of a narrow sloping edge, similar to my SLB5. I like that. That's really cool. Straight tone arm. I like it a lot. Really, really cool. So you come across these vintage units sometimes, and they're just in fantastic condition, like this one. I didn't have to do anything to it. I put a new belt on it and put a new cartridge on it. That was it. I already had I had a cartridge that was kind of a tight fit. I took it off a Sony automatic. That got me by until like a week later, my replacement belt, like $10 showed up. I had a bunch of cartridges that I could apply to it or put on it. So I did. Found a matching head shell that kind of matched the look. It was actually the head shell off of a C100, a Crosley C100, I think. Something with that same kind of silver body color. I wiped it down. It had been taken care of in great ways. I mean, it was very well taken care of. Then you have, it's not in here anymore. I took it to storage. I've got that Toshiba, similar age, visually looked, from a distance, pretty good, but it was a totally different story. It needed a lot of work. So the fact that it's vintage doesn't mean that it's great. It has potential. And I would say, yes, a vintage unit is more serviceable and probably will last longer in the long run than modern import tech. But at the same time, just because it's vintage doesn't mean it's instantly good. I will say that. Global South. I love my record player. What have you got? You didn't review the ADC AccuTrack. I don't even know what that is. Look that up. It's cool. Really cool. What the heck? That is cool looking. Can you program and like select which track you want to let's do, like a linear? That is cool. I like that a lot. Okay. To any assistant producers or producers that are in attendance today, remember ADC AccuTrack 4000. It's about $270 used. It's very unique looking. Looks like it's got multi-play capabilities. I dig it. Why do I keep saying that? I don't talk like that. That's cool. I like it. You're right. I didn't review it, but I would like to. Kyle says, I had a vintage GE, but sold it so I could buy my Audio Technica. Fair enough. Thank goodness I got a guy. Yeah, and that's just it. Having a good repair person is a good thing. My friend Fardamark, that really will dig in deep. He's up here in terms of his ability to, fix and willingness to fix, probably more so than anything. But he has a repair person that he can go to. I don't have that. I mean, I'm sure my dad could fix stuff, but I don't want to bother him like that. Dad, fix this. It is good to have resources in that regard. Otherwise, I remember when this is testament to my lack of technical associates that could help fix something. When I had that, no, it wasn't the Magnavox tape deck. It was my old 1968 Sears made by. Now I can't think of who makes this. Sears. Who makes Sears tape decks? You're going to tell me. You guys have already told me. But anyway, that tape deck, the thing got damaged in shipping, and the spindle was popping off, and I needed to rethread a hub screw. So I'm over there hauling this thing around Home Depot. And the guy's like, I don't know what this thing is, but we'll try our best. And so the hardware guy is trying to drill machine screws for me. It wasn't good. Who makes that stuff? I'm going to scroll down here. Somebody tell me who makes remind me, who makes the Sears or made the Sears? I want to say Sansui. It wasn't Sansui. Who was it? Come on. Can't think of it. Let me know in the comments below because I've forgotten. Bloxy Gamer says, although I love vintage tech, $500 have gone into them. I don't know if it was worth it. And that's just it. They can be a money pit. They can be a money pit and it still doesn't work. Or you know what I mean? You fix one thing and then something else springs a leak. Something to consider. It really, really is. By the way, before I forget it, please, please, please let me know in the comments here, in the chat, whatever, if you're watching the replay, in the comments down below. Let me know what you guys want to see next year. Turntables that you want reviewed, topics of shows, things we should go to do, anything you want to see on the channel, what you want less of, what you want more of. That's what helps steer the show. So I guarantee if you say you want to see it, we'll make our best effort to make it happen. So let me know what you guys want to see more of on this channel. Kyle says, I keep my 1965 Zenith record player. That's cool. David says, not vintage, but I use a Record-cut Re-EQ, which is great for 78 since RIA curve hasn't been standard standardized till 1955. Okay, so you would think in 6 years almost now of doing this channel that I would have done multiple shows about RIAA, and I haven't. I haven't even touched on it. I haven't even touched on it, or the fact that 78's being played on an RIAA compliant preamp or record player will require the reverse being pulled out. And that's a topic for another day. But yes, it's a very, very good point. If you want to get the full potential out of a 78. Old Radios has a 1967 Magnavox tape deck or turntable. David, I was wanting a record cut. I was thinking about a Macintosh C8. Okay, now you're out of my price range. Something with green lights and tubes, I bet. Dun, 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 dun. Yep, green lights and tubes. Oh, only $1,700 or $2,400. It's a knockoff for $400. You know, I spent a lot of time listening. It's over on a shelf right now, but I spent a lot of time listening to that tube preamplifier we reviewed last month, or this month, I guess it was. It's still December? It is. It's the 30th. This month. Christmas seems like a delineation point. Everything before it was a different month, but it was still this month. Anyway, we reviewed that tube preamp, and it's beautiful. It lights up, although there's LEDs underneath the tube. It's kind of mysterious. But it sounds good. It's got some warmth. It does sound warmer than a solid state. We did a side-by-side. Great show. You should go back and watch it if you haven't seen it already. But on the downside, it's a little noisy. The noise floor is kind of high. So I switched back. Right now, over here, I don't have the SLBD22 right now. I've got the Crosley. That's right. I replaced a Technics. Everybody screen capturing yet? I'll give you a minute to hit the screen record button. Everybody's going to be like, that's why. I took a Technics and replaced it with a Crosley. I did that in clear conscience. Not permanently, not forever, but I have this Crosley C200 manual turntable. Still love this new felt platter mat from Vinyl Moon. Thanks, guys. It's a heck of a static magnet, I will say that, but it looks pretty. And it's a gorgeous turntable made by Handpin Electronics. Somebody the other day on the channel said, everything that was Crosley made that starts with a C is made by Project, and it's not entirely accurate. So the C100 and C200s are made by Handpin Turntables of China, the same company that makes almost everything Audio-Technica. But the C10 and the C20, I think both are technically discontinued. Certainly the 20 is. They may still have the 10 around. Maybe it's just back stock. Both of those were made by Project. At least the turntables were. I don't know about the arms. Probably the arms were too, but they weren't the carbon fiber arms. Although if you saw a recent review of the new, relatively new A1 Automat from Project that we reviewed, it was disappointing. That was really disappointing. I still have it. I'm going to let my emotions kind of take a break, and then we're going to give it another chance and probably do another look at it. But yeah. Re-EQ is great if you want to listen to 78s in real time without going through a PC. And that's a good point, because if you're doing it through a PC, you can just, take the curve out in Audacity or something. Old amps used to have tons of EQ settings for that. True. Banana_Rage. I found 2 turntables at a thrift store today. An Iowa fully automatic turntable. So we're talking late 90s. That's a good one. From the year 2000. Yep. And a cheap record player that I will use for 78s. Both have been cleaned, adjusted, and fully work now. That's great. What a score. That's great. David says, common for the center hole not to be punched center. That's interesting. I've never... How does that work then? Is it like a record player then that would grasp it from the outside edge? That's really, really interesting. Because I know they would use like an optical scope to try and find the center. And there are sometimes where it's just kind of like not centered. Yeah, David, teach us more. I could learn from you too. I'd like to hear more about what you got to share. Old Radio says, I've been collecting 78 since 2008. Yeah, it's interesting. When I started this channel, I thought that that's all I would do was 78s. And it's been the minority of what I've collected. We have a healthy amount of 78s. My wife will say, yeah, you got a healthy amount, all right. But I need more. I want more 78s. This year specifically, I want to collect more 78s. I am looking for more Bing Crosby 78s. I'm looking for Obviously, Glenn Miller 78s, especially certain varieties and types I'm looking for. I love the oddities. I need to do another oddities channel, or not another channel. I'm not going to start another channel. This is the last one I may ever start. But hold on one second. So I am going to wipe my nose. I don't want you guys to see it. I need to do another oddities video because we've got some really interesting 78 RPM record oddities. We got 5-inch children 78s. We've got 7-inch 78s. We've got 10-inch 78s, obviously. We've got 12-inch 78s. We've got transcriptions. We've got paper records. We've got durium records. We've got vinylite records. We've got colored. We've got picture discs. We've got everything in that 78 RPM format. We've got bootlegs. I got a really cool, one of my favorite records is a Glenn Miller bootleg. It's on Biltmore Records, and Biltmore Records was famous for bootlegging RCA Victor and Columbia releases. So it's a bootleg of Glenn Miller, and it's really special because not only is it a Glenn Miller bootleg, but it's a bootleg of Glenn Miller's first band. So a bootleg of a rare record. And Glenn Miller, before he signed to RCA, was releasing on Columbia, on Brunswick, and the first band was. And then that lasted like a year, shut it down, and then started back up again with the band we all know and love before he went into the Army in 1942. And all of those were on RCA Victor Bluebird. Well, initially on Bluebird, which is sort of the lower end pop jazz label. And then once he was like so popular, he got promoted up to the RCA Victor Black label. I think that was 1942, a few months before he went overseas. And then was very prolific on the Armed Forces Radio Network overseas, so transcription discs. And those, man, talk about a holy grail. I would love to get myself my hands on some AFRN discs. I've got right up here, I've got two 16-inch AFRS 33 RPM, World War II era shows on 16-inch vinyl. And vinyl and 16-inch, or vinyl and 33 RPM were used all the way back to the late 30s in radio broadcasting and transcription work. You know, we think vinyl and we think 33 RPM, you know, we're thinking late 40s, the advent of the Columbia LP, but that was just the consumer introduction of that technology. It had been used extensively in radio transcriptions, you know, a decade prior. I also want to get my hands, see a couple Seabergs back there. Those are good. You'll never find them in the wild. You have to go on eBay to find those, or have a friend that wants to send you some. That's how I got mine. I've got 3 or 4. I got 2 hanging up right now. But I really want to find more V-discs. I want to find more V-discs. Those are 12-inch, 78 RPM. Depending on who is making them for the Army, I think the Columbia ones were shellac, very brittle, very thin. And in fact, my friend Fardamark had ordered one about a year ago. I'm like, you've got to get a V-disc. They're so cool. And he finally bought one, and it was crumbled by the time he received it because they packed it in an LP mailer. And because it was shellac, it was one of the Columbia pressed ones. It shattered, and that was sad. I've got one. Somebody gave it to me. One of you guys gave it to me. It's one of the vinyl ones. So it's a 12-inch vinyl wide groove 78 Glenn Miller one. And the V-disc program was great. And they're really fun to shop because you weren't supposed to ever own one. You were never supposed to own a V-disc. And the reason why is because they were the artists volunteered their music. Most of them were created for the purpose of the V-disc program. So they're special recordings. The artists would go into a studio in New York, like RCA or somebody, and cut the recording, and then it would be pressed and shipped overseas for the troops to enjoy on their record players that were, you know, supplied by, you know, private individuals. Glenn Miller provided a lot of those units, as well as the armed forces themselves, and they would ship over boxes. I even got to see, when I was at Kurt Knox, I got to see a box that was used to ship V-discs overseas. Anyway, so these records were to be destroyed at the end of World War II. Nobody was supposed to own them. They were illegal to own. And I know there was a guy on YouTube, V-Disc Daddy, but he's gone dormant, unfortunately. I've tried to contact him a number of times and have not been able to get a hold of him. And but V-discs are great. They're legal to own now. It's okay to own them. It's okay to buy and sell them. But the reason why they were for so long not allowed was because the artists were not paid royalties on those records. They were completely donated their time, their service, their music, their royalties were foregone. They did not get royalties, is what I'm trying to say, for these records. So that's why they weren't supposed to go into the commercial world. So they were ordered to be destroyed. Every single one of them was supposed to be destroyed after World War II. Thankfully, some people broke the law. There's a phrase you don't say very often. Thankfully, people broke the law. And there are a decent amount floating out there. They're not ultra rare. You're not going to find them at a thrift store in all likelihood. If you did, that would be a heck of a score. You can go on eBay right now and get a V-disc for $20 to $40. And they're cool. They're really, really cool. Okay. JD, good evening from Scotland. Welcome in, my friend. Thank you for being there. Also got my first tube phono preamp on Amazon with 0 reviews and $49. I know it's a hybrid type. That's probably the same one we reviewed. But sounds good to my ears. It's called the Record Pro Phono Box. That might be the one. I got it over there. David loves listening to 78s. David, if you are a 78 fan, please go back and look at our videos we did in, they would have been mid-October, so a couple of months ago. We went to Fort Knox, as he likes to call it, in Houston, and got to go underground, almost literally, and see a private collection of record players and records that is beyond what you would find in a museum. Highlights include Enrique Caruso originals, drawings and records, promotional items from record dealers from the 30s and 40s, the oldest phonograph in North America or in the world, the first sound recordings ever made in Africa, wax cylinders, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, rarities so rare that I can't even begin. I mean, we're talking like signed stampers signed by the Mills brothers and the Andrews sisters and Bing Crosby, metal parts, all kinds of stuff, just floor to ceiling, wall to wall, treasure trove. It was so much that I did 2 shows. If you guys love 78s, look up Kurt, K-U-R-T, Knock, N-A-U-C-T, N-A-U-C-T, or just type in 78 on this channel. It'll probably come up, and enjoy. Because those, if you love 78, you have to see that. I can't wait to go back there someday. It was amazing. Old radios, I had a dual 1015, but sold it. Never worked that good. I was overall unimpressed with the duals. I know some people swear by them. They've got sort of a following, and I respect that. My personal interaction, albeit influenced by my own stupidity, wasn't that good. I know the new dual stuff is not good. I actually, what I've been told is that Project bought Dual, or at least the Dual factory in Germany, and that Dual A1 auto, what was it? Auto, I don't know. The A1, can't talk. The Project A1 Automat that we just reviewed was really a dual automatic turntable. And the duals are known to not be that great. The brand name is a name only. They bear little resemblance to the duals of yore. That's what I've been told. JD, I just hooked up my old 1963 Fisher KX1000 all tube stereo integrated amplifier this evening. Sounds awesome. Okay, I'm looking that up. This is cool. Fisher Electronics. I love Fisher Electronics. You reviewed a Fisher turntable recently. Oh, wow. It is the Fisher. I thought that was a typo. I wonder, is this not Fisher that I'm thinking of? Is the Fisher different? Wow, dude, this is some expensive stuff. $155, $1,500, $4,500. Jeez, it's fancy. For rim drive, the 1219 is pretty quiet. The platter is heavy. Yeah, I do remember that. old radios. I want a Pilot portable with a Garrard turntable in it. Kyle loves his Audio-Technica. Kyle, I'm glad you got that. You picked a really good turntable. JD loved the Garrard 401 idler drive turntable. David has quite a few 78s where the hole's off center. So being able to center manually is a must. Those old Garrards are awesome. I love to get my Pioneer SX1080 receiver from 1978 recapped. Frisco Gaming, welcome in. I hope a company revisits linear tracking turntable soon. That would be good. And a changer, right? Nobody's doing linear. Nobody's doing linear. No, nobody's doing linear. Nobody's doing a changer. David says there's still some linear trackers, but they're, do they still make the super high-end stuff? Interesting. Red Law says, when I quit smoking, I treated myself to something special. I got a great deal on it. David Gammon Transcriptors, the Skeleton. Okay, I'm looking this up. I need to get a transcription deck. I need to get something that'll play those 16 inches. My old Audio-Technica LP7 almost could accommodate it, but not quite. Okay, I pulled that up. The first thing that came up was women's boots. Charles by Charles David. Women's Gammon tall over-the-knee boots. But scrolling down, we see Transcriptor Skeleton turned only $5,000. Wow. Yeah, I've seen these pop up every now and then. That's something else. The only thing I don't like about super expensive, well, a couple of things. One, I'll never be able to afford one. Number two, don't you sometimes think that the super expensive stuff, like the mega expensive stuff, is so industrial looking? It just doesn't look like user friendly. Like there's something about sitting down at a reasonably priced piece of equipment. It's something it's welcoming. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, use me to play a record or whatever. It sounds weird, but you know what I mean? It looks like it's friendly, user friendly, I guess what I'm trying to say. It's cool looking, but it looks like something that should be in a lab. But if that's what you like, more power to you. Okay, I need to fly through these. I'm sorry, guys. I'm getting so far behind, which is the name of the game over here. So if I'm taking 20 minutes to answer your comment, I apologize. Sunai QRX 7001 in the trash. Okay, I gotta look this up. Yeah, and this SLB5 that was pretty much brand new condition was going into the dumpster if I didn't want it. Isn't that crazy? I wonder how many things like that have been thrown away and just were never saved. Just ended up being in a landfill even though they were perfect. Oh yeah, that's a good looking receiver. And you know, I don't have a receiver, if you can believe it. I use powered speakers and mechanical switches. I don't have passive speakers and a receiver in here. Crazy what people throw away. It really is. Brett Law says, I know this channel is for new people in the hobby, but I love the channel and everyone's respectful. Appreciate that. We work hard to maintain and cultivate a friendly environment. Because why? It's a hobby. Come on. Let's be nice to each other, right? Just have some fun. David, have you seen this Soundburger? Yes, I've seen a Soundburger. So I've been having a harder time getting anything from Audio-Technica. And over the last year, I've got a contact over there. They use a third-party marketing firm. And they use a couple of them. And I've got contacts here and there, but they're just not doing product samples right now. So when I can, I'll purchase. It gets expensive. It gets real expensive when you're buying it. We bought almost everything we reviewed in December. We just purchased outright, full price. We just bought it. And that gets very expensive. But we wanted to have lots of good reviews for December. The Soundburger, I really wanted to grab one of those. I hope Techmona is right. By the way, sad video he posted. That was sad to hear. Very sad to hear. Prayers for him and his family. What he was saying about the YouTube issues of people and struggles, very relatable. It was very relatable. But he said about the Soundburger that he thinks it'll be coming back as a less exclusive release maybe with a different color or different, feature set. I would love that. It sold out almost instantly. And even he said it was hard for him to get a copy or get one, I should say, get a unit. But I would love to. I've got a Crosley Revolution Go or Go Revolution thing with a magnetic groove tool on it, and it's okay. It's such a low mass platter that it's got major wow and flutter unless you put a full size record on. So you put a 7-inch record, it looks super cool. And it transmits FM, which is kind of a cool feature, but there's just no weight if you don't have a full size record or something to stabilize it. If you do that, it's fine. I would like to find a vintage one, but all of those, from what I've heard, all the vintage ones need to be recapped. Like you're looking at a lot of investment. Sears Silvertone. I got a Sears Silvertone record on the wall back there. That red one. Can you see it? It's right just on the edge there. I think that's the one. Anyway, that's from that same era. They had Silvertone records and record players. Found a basic Pioneer cassette deck and matching change it for $17.99. Can't beat that. Turntable gently lowers the record and has a sensor to scan for the tracks. Oh, on that one we were looking at. That's cool. I gotta check that out. Sanyo's who made that tape deck and a lot of the Sears electronics. MG Official. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Jeremy says, I'd like to see more cartridge and stylus reviews and comparisons. That's good input. Thank you. Macintosh record compensator. I've heard of that. I need to check that out. Head-to-head direct feed. It's funny, the guy over at Grado, he doesn't like me. I want to do direct feeds and stuff too. I love the head-to-head. I love to compare this versus this. It's a battle royale. You know what I mean? I love that stuff. But he cannot stand it when we do that. He's like, I don't want any other cartridges on while this cartridge is on. And I'm like, but it's comparison. And his perspective is like, well, I want this one to have its moment in the sun. And I don't think his perspective is anything about that it won't perform well, because they do. I love Grado. Love Grado. But I agree. I want to see more head-to-head stuff. So we will see what we can do. Absolutely. Keep an eye out for that. A couple of months ago, I passed up a really interesting, very vintage, realistic brand preamp for like $5 a Goodwill. I should have bought that. That would have been an interesting show. Vintage versus new preamps. Direct feed sound tests. All that stuff. Mark Covington's in the house. Mark, I haven't seen you in so long. I'm so glad you're here. Happy New Year to you as well. Christmas was a blessing. It was great. It was so great. We got to spend a lot of time with family. It was a huge blessing. How have you been doing, Mark? David says Nakamichi made a turntable that sensed the off-center pressing and automatically compensated it by offsetting the platter. Oh, that's interesting. Nakamichi's stuff was amazing because it would always, even the tape decks would compensate for things and make adjustments. That would be cool. I still have guilt over passing up a $15 Nakamichi tape deck. No, it wasn't the Dragon. It was one of the more basic ones, but you're just not feeling it some days. Some days you got to be in the mood to buy a certain thing, or that day I just wasn't in the mood. It was stressful, and I'm just like, I don't want this thing, and I really regret that. I think my Yamaha is a better tape deck any day of the week, but it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting. It had that Nakamichi design aesthetic. It was sort of the bronze color one, not the black one. I like the black one better, but yeah, those tape decks would adjust as well. That is cool. If I came across a Nakamichi tape deck, that's a brand. And again, hearkening to tomorrow's show, and I say the opposite in terms of what I recommend you do. And I say oftentimes ignore brand names on modern tech, because oftentimes it doesn't matter. It's made by third parties. But I'm a sucker for the good stuff, as my dad says. And so when I see Nakamichi, I don't care if it's a toothpick holder. I'm probably going to pick it up from now on, because it's the good stuff. You know what I mean? So Nakamichi, anything, I'll probably pick it up if I get a chance. Same thing with Technics. I love Technics stuff. And it's foolish. It's wrong. You shouldn't do that. I had a Technics tape deck a couple of years ago we reviewed. It was okay. If it said Sharp on it instead of Technics or White Westinghouse or something, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. So I'm a sucker for the brand loyalty stuff. When we were at Fort Knox and got to see his treasure trove of 78s, he had some setups that would blow your mind, like concert level speakers. He had the DEQ thing, the Macintosh amplifiers with the tubes. He had this Technics beautiful sloping brown. It was like a half circle shaped plinth deck. It was like a $2,500 deck that could play transcription, 16-inch arm. And we were listening to these 78s, and even my wife was impressed, and she doesn't get impressed about anything. So, like, you think of a 78, the old, scratchy, distant, thin sounding, and Kurt puts on these records, these 78s. Most of them that he demoed for us were acoustic. They weren't even electric recordings. And it was like, holy cow, the fidelity was amazing. It was like the artist was in the room. They were better than what you would expect from like a high fidelity vinyl record. And he's like, this is why 78s are a thing, because it's not, so much of what we perceive as the limitations and the issues with 78s is by poor equipment, playing them back on RIAA equipment, using the wrong stylus, the wrong amplification, the wrong EQ. But using the proper stuff, they actually sound phenomenal. Kyle says, I saw a Sears Silvertone antique store the other day, $50. That's cool. 8-inch 78s. I may have one or two of those. Marcus and Elvis Productions. I like that. I picked up a vintage 60s Admiral brand. AM/FM radio has a phono option. Can you connect that to a modern turntable? I don't know, but I'm looking on the wall as decoration. I've got an Admiral turntable, the paper that comes on the platter when you first buy a turntable back in the day, with "Welcome to your new Admiral." And somewhere in my miscellaneous vinyl category, I've got a Admiral test record, and it sounds terrible because it's extremely scratched, but it's still very cool. A modern record player, probably yes, with the preamp turned off. I'm guessing the record player that would connect to that would be just with that. That would be phono level. So if it's phono level, my uneducated guess is yes. I would not put a line level input into that. It would probably blow it out. Manny from Germany, welcome in. So glad to have you here. Got a couple of those 33 RPM from the early 1930s. RCA put out. That's awesome. Bloxy Gamer says, I'm tight on space, but is it bad to put speakers on the floor? No. I mean, the thing is this. It's like, ideally, you don't want speakers on the same surface as the record player because of the vibrations. That being said, I've done it almost the entire time I've been playing records. This desk right now, well, not all. Like one record player is over here on a separate stand, but I've got one over here. And I'm not like pushing concert level decibels, so I'm not going to experience any issues. That being said, ideally you want a different surface. You would want them on the floor and then your turntable on a separate stand or something like that. Sound isolation helps. There's silicone damping, sound isolation, damping feet and things. I've reviewed a bunch of that stuff. Hudson Hi-Fi has a bunch of that stuff. But no, that's not a no-no. So maybe a couple of 33 RPMs. Yes, Marcus, just make sure that the turntable is off a phone. Sorry, I'm just reading through comments. Check sellers on other items. One of my favorite bands in Germany released 11-inch as a gag this year. That's cool. I remember Swingman 1938, but he's dead. That's terrible. I remember that name too. Take it back to the design on your door. Oh, thank you. Party store. It was just a party store. But I'm like, that looks crispy and good. We'll put that on the wall. It's some good 80s vibe. Yeah, I'm a sucker. I grew up with that. The child of the 80s. You know what I mean? Back to the Future, all that stuff. I had promos of certain albums because they were cut from first generation tapes and sound closer to the master tapes. So, Block C Gamer, I've got a question for you, specifically for you, because it sounds like you are aware of this. So, everybody else, if you need a bathroom break or to roll your eyes, I'm just trying to keep this under 60 seconds. Bloxy Gamer. I collect Patsy Cline music. Patsy Cline's music was destroyed in the 2008 Universal Studios fire, and all the masters were destroyed except for an album reel of the Greatest Hits 1967 album that was on order in Nashville at the time, but everything else was destroyed. All the half-inch masters, all the album reels, everything. So everything not digitized prior to 1938 is a dub as we know it. However, Vinyl Me Please released a copy or a version of Showcase with the original album artwork, 1961 album, and it says from original mono master tapes. Now, there are no mono master tapes, and I have an inside source that was a discographer that deeply covered Patsy Cline's discography, told me that it could have been a Canadian reel duplication, so an album reel duplication for Canadian pressings or something of that nature. Curious your input on that. So that's for Decca, of course. So let's see here. I have a 1960s Gerard KLH suitcase record player, but it needs some work, lubrication. I have a Sharp RP660 from 1972. Mark says, hey, Record-ology, have you ever owned a turntable that can be used as a single play or record changer? If so, which ones can you name? Now, a week ago, I was eating bacon and thinking to myself, this is a delicious breakfast, but it's also making me think of my friends on the YouTube show, specifically Mark Covington. What are you talking about? And I thought to myself as I was eating this breakfast, I don't have bacon very often, so it was a special thing. It got me thinking. It's food for thought. If he shows up, I wonder what interesting question he's going to ask me, because he always asks me these super interesting things, and this is no different. Have I ever owned a turntable that can be used as a single play or record changer? Which ones can you name? Yes. The answer is yes. 2. The SLB5 Technics has the removable spindle. In fact, right here in my little unorganized tray, which is so unorganized. Oh, here's a spindle. So here's a stacker spindle to my SLB5. It uses the umbrella style, which is cool. This, I've also got the 45 stacker. It's actually on it right now. Or I can just put on the single spindle, the single non-changer spindle. And I've also got a, let's see if I can think of it. It's not Gerard. It's not a BSR. It's the next level up from BSR. Anyway, my BSR type changer also does that. I don't own anything but the stacker spindle for that. So yes, I've got 2. One of them is capable of doing it right now. Great question. Bloxy Gamer, I found 3 pictures of a Beatles' first performance in DC and some old Boston speakers. The rubber dome is pretty much gone. Interesting. Good amount of changes can also be single plays, and most of them did not get single play spindles for those. Did they not come with them, Jacob? Did you have to buy it separately, the single spindle or the stacker spindle? I would assume it came with all 3, but I'm not sure. Gary's in the house. Gary, welcome in. The phono input is possibly for an X-Stall cartridge on the Admiral unit. Good input. Rich says some BSR changers can remove the changer spindle and a plastic short spindle installed. Jacob says, when you were younger, did you borrow records and tape them? That, for me, is a litmus test for people of a certain age, because everyone used to buy blank tapes and borrow records, borrow and record friends' LPs. No, I did not do that. However, I extensively copied cassette tapes that my friends would own. When I was coming of age in the late 80s and early 90s, primarily people were getting their albums on cassette tape, and we would just share them and duplicate them if you knew somebody had something you wanted. So we all had portable boom boxes with dual well cassette decks, and we would do high-speed dubbing. I know people did that with vinyl, and that would protect the vinyl. And oftentimes, if you find vintage vinyl in great shape, it's because they were played once, and the record was stored for the period after that. I would get records from the library when I was young and record them on reel to reel. Yep, people do that too. Bloxy Gamer, not really familiar with the Patsy Cline discography, but it's possible for the original master tape to be trashed or damaged and unusable. But I only have 2 I could find. I found it. Specifically, tell me more. What did you find? Which 2 do you have? Because yeah, what happened? All of her stuff was stored in that warehouse that had that fire. So all of her stuff, except for that stereo album reel of the '67 Greatest Hits album, were destroyed. They were burned. So when do I have it up here? I don't think I have it up here. No, it's in a different area. When Vinyl Me Please came out with that, and they said yes, this was remastered by Sam Smith using a mono album reel. They called it a master, but the masters were half-inch. I know it wasn't a master. Like, what master did he use? What album reel did he use? It didn't exist. That album didn't have any materials left. Jacob says, depends on the turntable, but a lot of BSR changers only came with a stacker, even though they were single-play spindles that do exist. Okay, interesting. And that's probably why mine only has a stacker, which is frozen. I need to put some deoxit in there or something and loosen it up. David says the dual changers came with both spindles, but the 45 RPM one was separate. Tim Allen in the house. Welcome in, my friend. Taken from the original master can still mean master to digital or an analog copy and could have been copied prior to the big fire. LPs are rarely taken directly from a master tape. Right, well, they would be put on a lathe. Okay, I'm going to look up the language here. Vinyl Me Please. Patsy Cline. It's a beautiful tricolor record. I posted a picture of it the other day. What do they say here? What is the specific lingo? Remastered AAA from the original mono tapes by Ryan Smith at Sterling Sound and played it at Welcome to 1979. Both of those are in Nashville, I believe. From the original mono tapes, which is also interesting because that album has a stereo version as well. You have to keep the sensor clean for the AccuTrack. That makes sense. Bloxy Gamer at Paul McCartney, No More Lonely Nights dance mix, and the Producers 1981 album. That's cool. Tim, the Record Man Taylor. I like that. David says there's a list of artists affected by the fire. It's huge, and I've read that it's bigger. I feel like Universal hasn't. Let me just say this. I feel like it hasn't been communicated the scope of that incident, which was an accident. But at the same time, it's extensive. Like initially, there was panic, like, oh, it's huge, everybody's affected. Then it was communicated, no, it isn't that much. Most of the stuff had already been backed up. And then that was 2008. And then about 3-4 years ago, there was a little blurb saying, well, it might have been worse than initially thought. And I think it's pretty safe to say that that is the case. And again, insider knowledge, somebody that I know that had been a discographer confirmed that, yeah, that was all destroyed. All of it's gone. Now, being 2008, most of it's backed up. And you may say, well, so it's backed up digitally. And by that time, it was backed up to direct stream digital DSD files, completely lossless. But let's say, just for argument's sake, let's say that some technology came down the pike years and decades from now that they could do something better with the original tapes than they could have done in 2008 with the DSD transfers. That won't ever happen. That won't ever happen. Have you listened to 1971 Farm? I have not. Mark Covington. Hey, Record-ology, do you currently own any 5 LP sets on the Showcase record label? I don't think so. Showcase record label. 5 LP sets on the Showcase record label. I don't think so. Maybe I do. I'm not even familiar with the Showcase record label. Yeah, I guess not. Bloxy Gamer says, I have Paul McCartney, No More Lonely Nights, Dance Make. Oh, I already read that. Sorry. Their list of artists picked by fire. I wanted a Craig RTR mono portable tape recorder that had a built-in AM tuner back in the mid-60s. That's cool. Jacob says, what do you think about the MoFi scandal that happened a little while ago? Apologies if you already have a video about it. Haven't seen all your videos, but I really consider that a non-issue. So Jacob, welcome in, and so thankful to have you here. And the other day, I'm sleepwalking, thinking about records. Okay, I wasn't really sleepwalking, but I was up in the middle of the night and I was thinking about the MoFi thing. And for those of you that aren't aware of what that is, basically, MoFi records were supposed to be direct from the source, analog, and it came to light that they were using digital mastered sources, like most records are these days. And there was a big to-do about that. I have talked about it. It's been brought up. I've never done a direct video about it. This channel is interesting. I would love to have a channel where I could talk about just anything and people would want to watch. Typically, if I'm not pointing the camera at a record player, people don't watch. So if I do a video, even if I review a record, unless it's extremely odd, it's hard to get views on that. And if I were to do a video just talking or ranting about something like that, it probably wouldn't do that well. So we try hard to keep the lens pointed at a record player as much as possible. And these lives are sort of an opportunity for the people that care more than just at that surface level to get in and talk and interact, for us to build the community here and just kind of hang out and have fun, be more informal. And there's a core collective of people that will do this, that will be here, and you probably already here or watching the replay. And a lot of people, the majority of people, 30,000 subs, will skip over the lives. You could say I'm giving away free record players, which we do from time to time and have done. We've given away dozens and dozens of record players. In fact, I got a stack of record players out there that need giving away. It doesn't matter. You could say I'm giving away free money and people wouldn't show up to the lives. It's very strange. So, yeah. Sometimes I'll wake up and my wife will be like, you were talking in your sleep about records. So I guess I talk about records in my sleep, which is, do I need to get a life? Yeah, probably. But I like records. What can I say? Yeah, exactly. Because digital was such a buzz term and still is to a degree, that anything analog was just, and that's where the marketing comes in. Because oftentimes where we hear terms like digital and analog are used in the context of marketing. People don't realize that things like 4G, 3G, 5G, those are marketing terms. Those aren't technical terms. And they're designed to communicate something to non-technical people. Those are not technical things. I work in a field where wireless telecommunications comes into play, and I guarantee you we're not talking about 5G and 4G. Sometimes LTE, but only the core base technologies in it. But where I work, we deal with a lot of information technologies. Love your show. Love you to show more oddities. Oh yeah, I got to do that. Rhett Law, absolutely. I'm always looking for them. I got more oddities. I've got weird things. Craig is AKA Sanyo. Interesting. It just comes referring to the universal fire. Yeah, it was terrible. It wasn't just sucks, Jacob. It was one of the greatest atrocities of our time. You know what I mean? Mark says, hey, Record-ology, do you recall ever seeing an album by Bob Hastings called 45 Songs Children Love to Sing? I have not. I have not heard of that. So what have we got planned? And keep the comments coming. I finally got caught up. Yeah, no, me too, Jacob. Absolutely. I've done the infamous video about CDs are better than vinyl. Prove me wrong. Gets comments every day. You idiot, you moron, that waveform, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that I did a great job of explaining it, but the basic premise that I gave holds true. Absolutely. I love compact discs. Absolutely. I love to own, if I can, my favorite albums on both formats. It's kind of extra, but it's fun to do. So things that are coming things that are coming up on the channel. Record player reviews, a lot of them. We'll be doing some interesting on-location stuff. I think you'll be surprised some of the places we take you this year. I'm excited to be able to share that with you. We got some fun plans in the works and really want to take it up a notch. Tomorrow's show will be fun, trying out a new intro. Let me know what you think in tomorrow's show. It's going to be posted again, 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. FLAC files are better than CDs. Well, yeah, because yes, they are. Old Radio says, like them both, but stuff I really like. I have on CD. I'm more picky. CDs are lossless and reach well above the human. Yeah, and that's true, Jacob. CDs are lossless. They're a lossless format, and that's something that people don't realize. 16-bit is limited, but they're way above the range of human hearing. So if you get like a 24-bit CD, mastered CD, all CDs are 16. Red Book, you have to be 2-channel. Even if it's mono, it has to be 2-channel. Has to be 44.1 sample rate, and it has to be 16-bit bit depth. That being said, if you fall into the, I wouldn't say a trap, but if you ever, and I have, bought one of those 24-bit mastered CDs, it's going to sound the same. It's just going to sound the same. To me, I really don't think your hearing, unless you have super hearing, could tell the difference. But from a technical standpoint, a FLAC file can hold more information. Bloxy Gamer, I'd love to see a video about different LP pressings and how they might differ in sound. That's a good idea. Jamie says, how about a show on Walkman type cassette players? It's been a while since we've done that. Thank you for the tip. We'll do more of that. This new beautiful cassette player that they have released, that Tecmo, of course, reviewed one of. I've been trying to see if we can get our hands on one of those. I think it looks cool. It's metal construction. Of course, it still doesn't have Dolby or anything. But would love to do. I'd love to do a direct drive Walkman. That would be cool. I'd love to find my old FW 2015 Walkman that I had. I did find my Iowa. No, not Iowa. It's not Iowa. It starts with an S. Sanyo? No. Sharp brand Walkman type device that I had as a kid. That was, it's not the best one by any means, but it was fun to find that. DAT tapes. Used DAT extensively when I was in broadcasting. I don't know if I would, unless I found some killer deal. It's a cool format. It's good, but that's kind of a fringe format for audio playback. Mark says, did you know Design used to be a record label? I did know that. That's really cool. Tim Almo's FLAC files are taken from CDs and therefore can't be better. Interesting. DAT tapes sound amazing. Maybe your dog can tell the difference, right? Those upper frequencies. Gary says the trouble with a belief is it does not have to be backed up by facts. So just look at any audio YouTube channel comments. And that's just it. So subjective. Everything here is subjective, right? So yeah, everybody's right and everybody else is wrong. And that's, get a bunch of people like that in the room. That's why our block list is very extensive. So when somebody says you've cultivated a very respectful community, I'm like, well, thank you. It's been a lot of work. Will LP records die out since the comeback? Oh, probably will at some point. They might flatten out. Jacob says, my dad used to use DAT tapes for computer storage. We had a SCSI drive. That's awesome. Oh yeah. I've worked in IT long enough to remember data storage tapes not that long ago. Absolutely. Reel to reel, 15 inches per second. I have done that before on this channel. We had an Iowa. No, why am I getting the brand names? Akai. I'm getting the Akai. I need to take a nap or something. I might get brand names are way off tonight. And it's only like 6. We had an Akai reel-to-reel deck with the 8-track in the side. That thing and an adapter to do 15 IPS. And I think we got it to do it too, but the thing was messed up. We ended up passing it along to somebody who wanted to work on it. But yeah, I would love that. My friend Fardamark, little sneak peek about what he's coming up. He just got his hands on a TIAC 10-inch deck, and he's got these 10-inch metal reels. But it doesn't do 15 IPS, which is surprising. But it does do 7.5, probably way better than my Akai could do. Yeah, if I found a way to do 15 IPS, that's now you're talking, that's what's 15 IPS half-inch tape. That is professional tape. CDs make artists put too much music on their albums. LPs are more concise. Interesting. That's very interesting. Beatles pressing difference, a huge rabbit hole. There's just too much. I've heard about that. The thing about the Beatles is that they have sold millions of records. So unless you have a very rare pressing, there are millions exactly alike. You ever pass over a record and you regret it? About a year or two ago, I passed over one of those. I think they're Chinese colored vinyl pressing knockoffs, and they've done them for the Beatles. And this one was actually a Beach Boys, like orange clear vinyl bootleg. That would have been fun to show. I should have got that. Haunted Coachman. Hi, Mr. Record-ologist. I just found you live again. Yeah, we've been live for an hour and 10 minutes. And I know it's not your fault. It's just that they're goofy with what they're serving up the notifications. Thank you for being there. Jacob says, I'm going to be given some quadraphonic gear soon. Sansui amp, Akai reel-to-reel, bunch of tapes, and 4 speakers. Oh, that's really cool. Quad, I've heard, is very amazing. I absolutely... again, going back to my friend Fardamark, he last year he got a quad 8-track deck. It was cool. It was really, really cool. Mark says, hey, Record-ology, how many 8-track tapes do you currently own? We did a video recently doing a system tour where I showed all my system, and I showed the majority of them. Let's see. Probably 45, 50, which is probably more than I ever need or ever thought I would own. The ones I really care to have, probably 10. Just not a huge 8-track guy. It is interesting. We reviewed them extensively, how to fix them, how they work, all that stuff. If you ever have to open one up, God help you. It's a terrible thing. So can you get a 15-inch per second kit from any Akai? Because my, what is this thing? A GX4000D. This is the early 80s model with the glass heads. This only does 2 speeds. It does 1 7/8. No, it doesn't do 1 7/8. It does 3 3/4 with the sleeve off, and then it does 7.5 with the sleeve on. Different capstan and pinch roller. Yeah, and that's what the Akai had. It had a different pinch roller for it. How good are all-in-one turntables in your opinion? Are you talking about like a wooden all-in-one? I think that they're a fair starting point. I think they won't give you the best sound quality, but I think it's a fair starting point. They're cool. And if you like it and you're having fun with it, that's fine. They're not going to damage your vinyl. They're going to wear them. They're going to wear your records faster, but not so much that you could call it damage, in my opinion. I think that they're fine. You may get started with them and move on to something else, and that's fine. That's what we always say here. I will never understand the fascination with 8-track. They can sound pretty good if you get indoor equipment and tapes that haven't been baking in the sun. But it's an, I don't want to use that term. It's not cool, in my opinion. I mean, it's interesting to a degree, but I don't have any emotional connection to them. Neither does my dad. My dad had an 8-track player, like a Spark-O-Matic in his car, and he had a couple of tapes for it, probably Elvis tapes, but it wasn't like this big thing in our family. So there's no like emotional connection to it. That being said, it can be fun. It can sound surprisingly decent. Hold on a second. So let's see what we got here. Revox, I heard, is really good. I've heard that too. I got a quad Sony reel-to-reel, but it's the only quad gear I have. One's from the 60s. My grandmother's garage is a holy grail for machines. Wow, that sounds cool. 2-track. Yeah, that's awesome. Those people were eager to get rid of 8-tracks. Every time you played an 8-track, you wouldn't know it was the last time you'd hear it. And I still get nervous when it comes. Like, oh gosh, is this the moment when the tape snaps? And I'm trying to bet my best tapes, I've put on a new piece of tape over the back of the contact. But yeah, it snaps, gets sucked in, and then it's about a 5% chance you could bring it back. I love watching your videos. Are you familiar with the Telesound telephone AM/FM radio? It's battery powered and looks like one of those brick phones from the 1980s. Can't find anything about it. Well, first of all, thank you for being here and for the nice comment. I really appreciate that. Let me look it up. Telesound telephone AM/FM radio. Let's see. So I'm seeing a couple different things. I'm seeing like a telephone kind of cassette radio thing. I'm seeing I think it's called a restroom telephone with the radio. That's kind of weird. Interesting. So no, I don't think I have. It sounds really, really interesting though. If you find out more about it, let me know. I'd be curious. My reason they gave it to me out of the box stuff. I'm fascinated. It sounds cool. 8-track was made to be adequate, not hi-fi. It was just to listen to, originally made cheap. And here's the thing about 8-track. It can sound really good. It can the perceptions of 8-track and even compact cassettes sounding bad are because people had cheap equipment, they didn't take care of the tapes. That's why I say if you get a proper hi-fi 8-track machine that was indoors, that was it was taken care of, all of that good stuff, then yeah, you're probably going to have a pretty high fidelity experience. It'll surprise you if you haven't hooked up to a nice sound system. It will surprise you. But most people, they were in their cars, the tapes were baking, they they just weren't maintained and they sounded bad, and that's what everybody remembers. The splice always breaks. Ultimately, it will. Now, I personally don't agree that you have to replace the splice on every tape. Leave the splice, but reinforce the splice. Get some clear backing tape and reinforce it. You can, and I've done it. We've demonstrated it. Put a new metal splice on there, but as long as it's got enough metal, a lot of times the metal will wipe off. But if you just replace, or if you don't want to replace it and you just want to put a backing tape on there, then that will do the trick. So I'll tell you what, guys, I like a strawberry milkshake on a warm day. That's a delicious thing to have. But another delicious thing to have is an 8-track tape that's been properly spliced and backed up and is not going to snap on you, because that is a problem. Absolutely. My rubber sole snapped and no one can fix it. But $30. Oh, I'm sorry. That's terrible. With turntables, reel to reel, you get to watch your music go around. Absolutely. Do you remember? I agree. And that's the thing about 8-tracks. You don't see anything. You know what I mean? You don't see. It's kind of like a lot of CD players. You don't often see what's happening. Do you remember Eaton tapes being on the side of the road from people throwing them out their car? I've heard about it. 8-track heads being misaligned, etc. I've heard of that as well. Jacob says, my uncle opened the Radio Shack at Regency Mall in Augusta, Georgia. They had a hi-fi 8-track recording deck, and they'd record to them from LPs. That's awesome. In the UK, it was all cheap. The equipment was just thrown together. Track alignment was bad. It was half the price of a cassette player. There was if you want a very, very interesting video, there is a fascinating YouTube video by, I'm trying to think who put it up. Hold on a second. I want to tell you what this is. I don't know if one of you guys sent this to me. Okay. It's called Neil Young Goes Record Shopping, Finds His Own Bootlegs, 1972. And it's literally a film shot in 1972 at a record shop. And it's 15 minutes all in one take, no cuts. And it's fascinating because they're literally walking around following Neil Young, record shopping. and it's all one take. And he finds his bootleg copies of his own bootleg records, and he gets into an argument with a shop owner. But what made me think of this is there's a very interesting comment that the record shop owner makes, and he says, I don't have any records. I can't afford them. I only have tapes. So yeah, it was a cheaper option, but it was the first way to bring audio into the car. I mean, besides radios, and yes, I know there were record players that went into cars, but for the most part, the majority of people, that was kind of the first way to bring an album into the car. And if they were dubbed, they were going to sound lower quality. If they were homemade tapes, they were going to sound lower quality. If they were left to bake in the car, they would just, sound bad. And that's, where a lot of that perception came from. But there are high fidelity 8-track tapes that can sound fantastic. I've got a basic sound design. This is a cheapo deck, playback only. It's imperfect. It could use a recap. But even with everything as it is, if you want to see it, check out that video I was saying the other a few minutes ago about a system tour we did. Connected through my nice speakers, subwoofer and everything. Sounds really good. Sounds really good. David says, I've seen it. It's hilarious. It is. It's weird. The Neil Young footage was shot in December 71. Okay, so it was labeled wrong. Interesting. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for now. I want to thank you for making time to chit-chat about vintage tech and whatever else came up. If you're watching the replay again, feel free to jump in with the comments. I hope you get to join us on a future episode. And if you're in the live feed now, you don't want it to end. When I disconnect here, we will be replaying automatically. You can stay connected, and we will be replaying another live that you may not have been a part of. So you can jump into that right after this. But I'd like to see you buy a homebrew ultrasonic cleaner and review it. That would be good. David, thank you for being there. Hi for a little while, Danny Bonaducci was going to use record stores and signing. He still does, I think. And I also, for a while, I blew through all of those Amoeba Records What's in My Bag videos. I think those are fascinating. But yeah, that's all really cool stuff. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for now. Happy record hunting. We'll see you again real soon. Take care.